Freedom Talks broadcasted from the Museum of Movements in Malmö, Sweden. My name is Ole Reitov and I'm honored to moderate the session entitled Ramy Essam and the Balaha Case.
شلتك وتنور سجن المزرعة. ايه يا بلحة، ايه يا بلحة يا بلحة، يا حلوة يا بلحة يا مقمعة، خلصت سنينك الأربعة. يا حلوة يا بلحة يا مقمعة، خلصت سنينك الأربعة. طولت علينا بطلتك، زهقنا خلاص من خلقتك. ده إلهي ينور صلعتك ويسيبك حظك من الدعاء، وتلم في ايدك شلتك وتنور سجن المزرعة. ايه يا بلحة، ايه يا بلحة 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 بلحة. 4 سنين عدوا كده والشعب مش لاقي اللضر، مدت ايديك لده وده بتعبي في كروش القدر، وان قلت تبني جيل جديد تعمل سجون ببواب حديد. تسلم يا زعيم المرقعة، يا حلوة يا بلحة يا مقمعة، يا حلوة يا بلحة يا مقمعة، خلصت سنينك الأربعة. يا حلوة يا بلحة يا مقمعة، خلصت سنينك الأربعة. ايه يا بلحة، ايه يا بلحة يا بلحة. فاشل بالطول موقف بالعرض من خدتك، قلت تبيع الارض يا كورة، شربوا بصوها لبعض وخطفوا النيل وبنوا لك سد. حفرت قناة يمكن تكسب وعرفنا انها حفرة ومقلب، يا ريتك بيجيب منفعة. يا حلوة يا بلحة يا مقمعة، يا حلوة يا بلحة يا مقمعة، خلصت سنينك الأربعة. يا حلوة يا بلحة يا مقمعة، خلصت سنينك الأربعة. ايه يا بلحة، ايه يا بلحة 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 بلحة. ارهاب بيكتر ما بيخلص، اعلام معرس ما بيشبعش، تطبيل ولحس وغش في غش، والشعب ملهي في اكل العيش، والعيش محل بق الجيش، ونفق في مرة لهوب الماتش. يا زعيم نظام الشخلعة، يا حلوة يا بلحة يا مقمعة، يا حلوة يا بلحة يا مقمعة، خلصت سنينك الأربعة. يا حلوة يا بلحة يا مقمعة، خلصت سنينك الأربعة. ايه يا بلحة، ايه يا بلحة يا بلحة. بتبني مدينة جديدة، بتعمل سروية اصحابك تاكلوا بديفور، وتسيبنا بنغرق في الكستور. ما الشعب خلاص كشف المستور، حلقاتك برجالاتك عمل له حاجاتك بندولاتك. يا حلوة يا بلحة يا مقمعة، خلصت سنينك الأربعة. يا حلوة يا بلحة يا مقمعة، خلصت سنينك الأربعة. طولت علينا بطلتك، زهقنا خلاص من خلقتك. ده إلهي ينور صلعتك ويسيبك حظك من الدعاء، وتلم في ايدك شلتك وتنور سجن المزرعة. ايه يا بلحة، ايه
That was the Balaha video. 8 people were imprisoned soon after the video was published, including the lyricist of the song, the poet Galal El-Bahiri, and Ramy Essam's former social media expert Mustafa Gamal. The director of the music video, Shady Habash, died in May this year in custody after being jailed for almost 800 days without trial. We're going to discuss this, but first I'll say that the talk today can be followed at the Museum of Movements website, at Vimeo, and at Facebook. And those of you watching or listening, you're welcome to submit questions and comments through social media and the Museum of Movements, I'll call it MOM, M-O-M, Facebook site, and then we'll bring some of the questions up at the end of the broadcast. Now, to discuss the video and the imprisonments and the legal implications and the role of the artist and artistic freedom, this first edition of Freedom Talks from Malmö is now connecting to the panel of the day. In Helsinki, Finland, we have Ramy Essam, award-winning artist and human rights defender, living in exile. Ramy, are you with us?
I am.
You are. And we also in Helsinki have Sanni Kahilainen, who has been campaign leader. Sanni, are you with us?
Yes, hello everybody.
Hello. And in Stockholm, we have Alfons Karabuda to join us. Alfons is president of the International Music Council, as well as president of EXA, which is the European Composer and Songwriters Alliance, as well as SKAP, which is the Swedish Society of Songwriters, Composers, and Authors. Welcome, Alfons.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
And finally, not least, in France, I welcome Andra Matei, founder of Avant-Garde Lawyers, defending artists. Hello, Andra. Can you unmute so we can hear you, Andra?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thanks.
And I know some of you are in the countryside and some are in the cities, and I'm here in Malmö. And if you will hear some noise sometimes, it could be happy students passing by in the streets with their horns and the button, if you hear that. But we will start discussing the video. And Ramy, what was the idea behind the video? And maybe you should also start by telling us Balaha, what does that mean?
It was 2018. It was the moment for the second presidential elections. It was already a case of like silence, like the streets were quiet, people were quiet. There was no space and chance for people to protest and speak out anymore like before. And this was the moment when me and Galal decided that we want to do something. And we decided to make the song Balaha. And basically Balaha was to just like start the dialogue between the people, to highlight the corruption, the oppression that happened in the previous 4 years. We wanted peacefully through art to remind the people of the right to speak, the right to criticize, and the right to dream of change. And so that's basically the song. And what we tried to use the satire art form in this song, because in Egypt, satire is just part of our culture. It's in every day for everybody, and that's all.
But satire has also been, in a way, dangerous for some of those people involved in satire. We know of satirists in Egypt who were also imprisoned. You are out of the country. You are now living in exile. First you were living in Sweden and now in Finland. The consequences for your friends who were involved in the project were very, very serious. Could you just tell a little bit about three of the people we're going to talk about, Galal, Mustafa and Shady, and their different roles?
Yes. Like the reaction of the government after the song was out was so extreme, was so violent. When the song was out, it went viral, and in just a couple of days there was like millions of streams everywhere. And then after that there was anti-media campaign from the governmental media speaking out in the biggest talk shows against Galal and me, that we should be slaughtered, they should take our nationality away, we should be in jail, and so on. And after that there was like extreme hunting process to people that was getting arrested, people that have things to do with this song, or even people that has nothing to do with the song, or even with me, were ended up in jail. And the process of arresting them was very violent arrest that followed by a couple of days of torture for all of them. And since I will be talking about Galal and Mustafa and Shady only here, so I have to mention that Galal is already in jail at the moment, serving 3 years sentence by a military court because of his poetry book. And this book for sure has the poem Balaha. And Galal served 2 years. He still have 1 year to serve. And Shady, he's not with us anymore. Like you mentioned, he passed away in the 1st of May. And Shady was the editor of the video. And people have to know that Shady was not any part of making the song. He was not part of any planning. He was not even in the location of the filming, because it was filmed outside Egypt. And he just received the material from us, and he did the post-production. And he still ended up in jail for almost 800 days, which means that in the last part, he was illegally, like pre-trial detained in jail, because he already crossed the limit of the 2 years. So he died in the window of time that he was illegally kept in jail. And Mustafa Gamal is the same case when it comes to the being illegally detained and kept in jail, because he already crossed the 800 days in jail. And but I have to mention that the only good news that we received in so long time was that Mustafa gonna be released, and he might be released today or in the next coming days. And this was a big relief. And Mustafa was as well, like Shady doesn't have anything to do with the song. The only thing he did with me was like in 2015, like 3 or 4 years before the song. He just verified my Facebook page in a very professional relation, and that was it. And he was still one of the people that got arrested.
And we'll come back to more on the legal details of these 3 people. During this period where they have been imprisoned, Sanni, you have been campaigning for their release. Why have you done so, and in which ways have you been campaigning?
Thank you, Ole. Well, my day job here in Finland is that I'm head of communications at the Finnish Musicians Union and Secretary General in the Finnish Music Council. So I work with musicians and their rights and communications, advocacy locally and internationally. And through my work, I have had the chance to work with artists at risk and freedom of expression. And that's how I got to know Ramy, and that's how I got involved with this case in the first place. But then it exploded. The whole case became so big and so long as we see now. So it became part of my life because it's combining also communications, advocacy work, and freedom of expression. So I was already involved, and so I stayed there, how to stop that before everybody is released. So that's how I got involved. And since the beginning, we have had amazing support from all kinds of organizations in the arts field and human rights organizations as well, and politicians, lawyers, and some of them are here in the panel with us today, and it's amazing support that the guys in prison have received. And my role has been coordinating. I've been the mediator between organizations and the people in Egypt, and Ramy and the politicians and media. So that's my role in here, and it's changing all the time when the case is proceeding.
Did you sort of make a plan on how you wanted to develop the advocacy or campaigns, or has that been sort of developed during the period?
Well, it has been developing because everything has been changing all the time. For example, how the guys see the situation from Egypt, what are their wishes and what we can say about them, what they wish us to do. Then also what kind of legal advice we get from the lawyers, and what kind of articles the journalists are willing to write. All these things are involved, and some of the guys have been released and so on. So it's changing all the time.
Yes, because when you follow campaigns over various artists who are imprisoned around the world, sometimes you realize that there's been nothing in public for a long period. You were mentioning that you have to get the consent of the artist. Is that one of the important principles when you make a campaign, that the artists are aware that it's taking place?
Yes, definitely. From our point of view, that's the most important thing, because they are the ones who are detained and their human rights are violated and they cannot have their voice heard. So we have the responsibility to tell everybody what they think and what is their wish.
So the campaigns, has that been a combination of what you've been doing out in the open, which has been in the media, and then what you've done in what we call silent diplomacy?
Exactly. Yes.
Andra, you have been working on this case from the legal side, and you're also the founder of Avant-Garde Lawyers. Could you briefly tell us about what is Avant-Garde Lawyers?
Well, Avant-Garde Lawyers is an international legal NGO. We work with specialized lawyers across the world to provide pro bono legal support to artists unable to afford it. Our work comes with a philosophy, with an approach that is different and that has at its center the artist. We want to make sure that the voice of the artist is heard and that the intention of the artistic gesture is accurately represented and presented in court. So for this, we create teams that are mixed, where you have experts from the legal side and art experts as well that come together to work. And with each case, we try to we try to offer an instrument that will have an impact not only on the individual artist, but also on a larger scale, and is part of a broader strategy to advance freedom of artistic expression. It is what we call strategic litigation or legal advocacy, and this is what we do.
And you are a human rights lawyer, and maybe people watching, also listening to us, can now hear the horns here. It's those very happy students that are passing the museum because they got their examination today. So if you hear those horns, these are happy horns. But you're a human rights lawyer. Do cases related to artists, do they differ in any way from other human rights cases?
Well, Avant-Garde Lawyers works on not only on human rights cases, we also deal with matters of copyright and intellectual property, but yes, most of them are human rights related. And when I say human rights, it mostly is free speech and immigration. We have artists that are trying to flee their countries and seeking safe havens in Europe, and then we help them with their visa applications, for instance. So I think human rights work in general is very difficult. But yes, I think with artists it's different because one of the reasons it is different, I believe, is the fact that artists their position in the legal space is very weak. Artists as such are not considered or identified as a vulnerable group or group that needs special protection. We say in the law that if you contribute to public debate and if you get involved in matters of general interest, then the level of protection is very high. And this is the reason why, for instance, political speech is one of it's a form of speech that is very well protected. So you have politicians that are well protected, you have journalists that fall within the same category, but artists, they do not enjoy that same level of protection. You could argue it on a case-by-case basis before a court of law, but as a group, they don't enjoy that. So this makes it very, very difficult to work with artists, because if they are harassed or imprisoned or put behind bars, then we know that the reasons for that are related to their artworks, to their artistic expressions. Most of artistic work today is social and political. It has this dimension that concerns us all. So that would be one difference that I find between working with artists and other groups.
I'll come back in a minute to some of the mechanisms that you've been working on, but I'd like to move up to Alfons. But before I do this, there may be some people who have just joined us during the session, and I'm sitting in Malmö in the Museum of Movements with a lot of cars outside the door, being happy students. We are now in the first Freedom Talk from Safe Havens, and we're discussing the effects of the Ramy Essam Balaha video, which led to several imprisonments in Egypt. And for those of you who have joined us from the beginning, in the panel we have Ramy Essam, we have campaign leader Sanni Kahilainen from Finland, lawyer Andra Matei, which you just saw, and then president of the International Music Council, Alfons Karabuda. Alfons, just briefly, International Music Council, could you just briefly tell what is the International Music Council?
The International Music Council, IMC, was founded in 1949 by UNESCO, and it's the world's largest network of organizations and institutions working in the field of music. We have an outreach of over 200 million people.
And you have something called 5 musical rights. What is that?
It's basically what is needed to ensure that we develop and also safeguard the whole musical ecosystem. So it's 5 music rights. Number 1, it's the right to express themselves musically in all freedom, the right for children to learn languages and skills, the right for children and adults to have access to musical involvement. The 4th right is about developing their artistry and communicate through all media with proper facilities. And also the last music rights is the right to obtain just recognition and fair remuneration for their work.
And this is very much in line with the UNESCO 2005 Convention, which includes artistic freedom, and artistic freedom in the UNESCO sense also includes social and economic rights. But as we know, Alfons, there are huge regional differences when it comes to social and economic rights, but also freedom to express yourself. How does it look from your chair?
Well, you could say that it's quite dim. It's difficult because there are a lot of challenges out there. And I would like to start by once again thanking Ramy for doing what you do, for raising your voice, for writing the songs like Balaha, for doing this, because I know that there are forces wanting you to feel guilty, which you, of course, shouldn't. It's your duty, and it's all of our duty to do what you are doing. And you are actually the voice of IMC, and the IMC wants to be your extended voice as well. So I have to say that what you're doing is important not only for you, it's important for all of us.
Thank you so much, Alfons, for these words. It means a lot.
Thank you, Ramy. And I want to say, Ole, from my point of view, it's very different. There are differences for cultural creators, for composers, for musicians. And as Andra said, there are difficulties looking at the juridical aspects because it's difficult to safeguard us working in the cultural field. And the thing is that we should not have any more rights and other rights than any other human being. It's just that it takes other kind of measures in order to secure that we actually get the same rights as anyone else, that we can express ourselves in freedom. And this is, of course, very different in different regions. Some of the regions has other kinds of challenges. Maybe we can get back to that when it comes to self-censorship, etc.
Certainly. Thank you very much, Alfons. Andra, I'd like to come back to you and talk specifically on the circumstances around Shady's death a couple of weeks ago. What do we know? I mean, there are some public explanations, and then we know that there are always a lot of hidden things. Could you update us a little bit on this?
Yes, of course. So I'd like to start by saying that Shady was a political prisoner. And he was held, as Ramy said, in unlawful pre-trial detention for simply directing the Balaha song music video. Now, I've been asked before this meeting to explain some of the legal terminology, and I'm going to do this very briefly. So pre-trial detention, I want to make it clear that it's not a sanction, but a measure that is taken during criminal investigations to make sure that the person under investigation is not absconding, it's not eluding justice, does not try to commit another crime or to escape or interfere with the course of justice, right? And in pre-trial detention is an exceptional measure. It shouldn't be taken as a common measure for every person under investigation. Like when Shady was arrested, he was 22 years old, and he had no prior criminal record. He was an artist. He was a photographer. He was a filmmaker. So there was no reason for him, in the first place, to be in pre-trial detention. There are other measures that are less intrusive, like bail or interdiction to leave town, that can be used. So this is the part of the pre-trial detention. Now, why was it unlawful? It was unlawful because Ramy already explained it. Egyptian legislation provides 2 years time limit for pre-trial detention. And when he died, he had already been in prison for 2 years and 3 months. So he died in unlawful detention. Now, Tora prison is Cairo's Cairo's maximum security prison, and it's reputed for its overcrowding and its poor sanitation. So the fact that Shady spent almost 800 days there had a great impact on his health and his general situation. So why he died? Well, according to the prosecutor general statement, he ingested hand sanitizer, alcohol-based hand sanitizer that was distributed to inmates because of the COVID-19 pandemic. According to the same statement, he was immediately taken to infirmary, and he was looked after, and while they were preparing to take him to the hospital, he died. Now, all this had happened in a period of 24 hours. Now, this version of fact is disputed. It's disputed, and information coming from prison says that, well, first of all, Shady died in his cell after hours of agony and cries. But I would not like to get into too much detail about the discrepancies between these two versions, but just say that regardless of these discrepancies, when a person dies in custody, there is a strong assumption and that the state is responsible, right? So because of that, authorities need to perform an autopsy and conduct an investigation that is impartial, that is independent, and this didn't happen. There's still questions that are left unanswered and that need clarifying. And some of these questions are, has Shady died in the prison clinic or had he died in his cell? Why have the prison authorities, despite being informed of his, ingesting the alcohol-based hand sanitizer, was not treated for possible alcohol poisoning, but rather, they kept administering him anti-nausea treatment and antispasmodic treatment, despite the evident lack of improvement in his state of health.
When an artist or anyone, a human rights defender or political prisoner dies in prison, then there sometimes is a tendency that it moves on. People will keep this going on to memorize. From a legal point of view, what can you do to keep his case alive? What are the kind of mechanisms that can be used?
Well, when we have a judiciary that we cannot rely on, like in Egypt, where we can't rely on domestic authorities to perform, an investigation, as I said, that is impartial and independent, then we don't have much choice but to go at a supranational level. Like in the Council of Europe, we have the European Court, but in Egypt, we only have the UN. So what I did with Ramy, together we appealed the UN Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial, arbitrary, and executions, and summary executions, Agnes Kalamar, who is an excellent lawyer and investigator. She's the author of the Khashoggi report. So in about 1 month and a half, we are going to have news from her, hopefully. So we did this submission before her by highlighting the discrepancies between the two versions and by asking some of the questions that lie at the basis of this analysis.
And so for those unfamiliar with the mechanisms, the UN Special Rapporteurs, and there are several rapporteurs, they are independent. They work independently, they submit their reports independently, and then they present their report to various UN groups. But let's say her findings will show that the authorities are guilty of this and that. Does that have any implications for the Egyptian authorities then?
Well, already when the special rapporteur is part of what we call special procedures in the UN, and you have some of the working groups in that. It's a big body of the UN, let's say. So already Ms. Kalamar is liaising with the Egyptian authorities. So she's doing a lot of work that is confidential and that it's behind closed doors, like through diplomatic channels, and she's doing her own investigation, and we don't know if after her investigation has been finished, if she's going to release a report that is going to be public or not. So already we don't know that. So if in the end she releases a report because her communication with the government have been lacking, or she found something that needed further investigation or gross, human rights violations.
We will come back and talk more about Mustafa and Galal's legal situation. Before we do that, Andra, I'd like to get you back in here, Ramy. We started with the Balaha video, and from what I can see on YouTube, it has had 6 million views and 16,000 comments on YouTube. Could you tell a little bit about those responses that has been on YouTube? Many of them are in Arabic, and of course you can use Google Translate, but have you been following all these comments, Ramy?
It's for sure it's very hard to follow all of them, but I've been with this song. It was not different than any other previous songs, especially that I always have my opinion or a direct message in my songs. So like usually you find people that support and people that hate, and with this particular song, the two feelings were to the extreme, either the supporting or the hate. And like it happened before with other songs, I got all kind of hatred messages to the level of like the death threats. And this was from Egypt or from outside Egypt too. So that's the comments pretty much.
I mean, you've been in a situation since you left Egypt where you've done a lot of talks and a lot of sessions and whatnot. But I'm not sure you talked a lot about the importance of working not only with campaigners but also with lawyers. Could you tell a little bit about the difference of working with lawyers and working with campaigners?
Okay, both tools are extremely important, and especially in this case, in Balaha Case, with Sanni Kahilainen and Andra, both of them were extremely helpful. So if I will talk about the campaigning part, even for me as an artist that has like big platforms on social media, I still didn't have the know-how of communicating with people and how to write the news or how to update organizations and how to follow up with the people. I don't think that artists are so good in these things anyway, and I'm one of them. And how to put the words out, or even how to spread the news. This is how much the campaigning was extremely important. Without it, I wouldn't move forward so much from the beginning. Especially that in these kind of cases, the artists are also going through some hardships. So it's not you need team to work together. And on the legal terms with Andra, I'm coming from Egypt, from a country that there is no law, there is no system. So like I don't believe in law in Egypt, because it just doesn't work there. It's not fair. There's no justice. So I'm not so familiar that one of the first tools to think about is to run to a lawyer. But when I saw what Andra was doing to us, and like how she think and how she's using the law as a tool to put pressure on systems and regimes, it was very, very powerful. And all these elements together are extremely important to work in harmony.
Sanni, what has been the most challenging things working on a campaign like this? Because normally people have so many campaigns they can look at and get connected to and forget. Keeping campaigns alive seems to be constant work. Could you tell a little bit about some of the challenges?
Well, thanks. It's a story of challenges. First, our goals are to raise awareness in general, and also to have an impact to get the guys released from prison. And one part that is really important is that we want to spread the message in Egypt, and that's really hard because there is no press freedom. It's a country where you can be arrested because of a tweet or a social media post. And just recently, the editor of the Only Free Press was arrested, then released on bail. But anyway, this is the situation. So how could we suppose that anyone would share anything or write anything? And that's the hardest part, and that's why it's hard to campaign at all. But of course, we still have to do it, to update people, to update the media, and to try to say it in a way that maybe somebody could share it. And in the same time, the Egyptian regime is having their own message, which is spread in their channels there. And like Shady's case is very good example of what happened, that it can also be spread outside Egypt, because when Shady died, the regime released their own statement, which was basically a humiliation campaign against Shady and defending campaign for the regime. And the international media and some journalists and even some organizations took this message as something that they started to share, because maybe it gave the chance to get some good titles in their articles and so on. And even people with good intentions do this because it's very hard to know what can be harmful for the people in Egypt and what not. So that's why our role is to think about these things and try to spread the other message. And the consequences of a post or an article can be really anything. It can lead to something good, it can lead to something horrible. They are so arbitrary that we cannot know. So we just have to try. At least we know that we cannot stay silent, so we just have to keep doing what we do and listening to all kinds of advice from Egypt and from lawyers like Andra has been very helpful in this. And then we have to listen to the artists.
And just to clarify, when you talk about media reports that hasn't, basically been lip servicing the regime, are we talking about the cause of death here, that a lot of papers probably just wrote that it could be hand sanitation, but we don't know?
Yes, these kind of things that they want to say, they might be words or expressions or stories that they want to tell, that they are not the story we want to tell. We want to tell about these people whose human rights are violated. They didn't do anything and they are oppressed and they have to be released. It doesn't matter what is the cause of the death. They didn't help him. It doesn't matter what are the charges. They are made up anyway. We don't want to tell about these things. We want to tell about what happened to them and that they should be released.
And before we go back to talking about Mustafa and Galal, we have different levels here. We have the campaign, we have the videos, and we have the imprisonment, then we have the campaigns, and we have the legal work. But there are also the situation of organizations. And Alfons, I'd like you to come in here. You represent the composers, the creative people in various organizations. What role can these organizations play in defending artistic freedom or supporting campaigns?
I think they can do a lot, and it is, of course, because of the individual always being the weaker party. So you can only go about any campaigning, any fight, if you actually work together with others. So it's a collective, and I think that we as individual creators or performers, we have that inside. We are creative, we understand our colleagues. Not always do the organizations themselves understand it, because they limit their own scope to be part of an ecosystem or a value chain, without understanding that if we don't safeguard it all, everyone will lose. So in trying to defend just one part, no one gets enough power to actually defend and promote the good values.
Sometimes you may have a feeling, at least from a European perspective, that artists' organizations have put a lot of focus, a lot of energy, a lot of money into defending their rights in terms of royalties, and copyrights and whatnot, but not so much freedom to express themselves. I don't know if you agree with me, but it's difficult to do both.
But this goes both ways. This is also something that the rest of the world, human rights organizations, they need to see, that the right to actually earn money and be strong by that, and to be able to continue as a professional artist, that is also a way of keeping your voice, original voice, strong. So you need the respect of others to see that earning money for a professional is not a luxury. I remember when my friend, the late Paul Brickhill from Zimbabwe, when he came to the Creators Conference in Brussels that EXA arranged and talked about the importance of money for them, the ones that he represented. Otherwise, they would need to work in the coal mine instead of actually being criticized through culture. So it's also important not having those kind of prejudices. It is about rights, but we need all of those rights. And we need to work, I think, the cultural organizations together with the human rights organizations. It's much closer.
We heard Ramy saying before that as an artist it's difficult to do all these things. Journalists for several decades have sort of protected their rights to freedom of expression through their unions, through networks. It seems that for journalists, freedom of expression is sort of in their DNA, so to speak. That doesn't seem to be the case with artists in general. It's been human rights organizations, artistic freedom organizations that mostly have been addressing these issues. Why do you think that is, Alfons?
It's a difficult question. I think that sometimes a creator does not always see his or her work as so important for an artistic, for the artistic expression. Maybe it comes from something else, but becomes important to others. I think that sometimes we are not really educated in that way. So I think that there's a tradition of seeing journalists and writers as the ones that are exposed to this. But this is also why we in Sweden, for example, when we worked with creating a safe havens, not only for writers, but also for those working in the field of music, as Ramy. And I think you have the proof of whether or not this has importance when it comes to artistic expression is when people go after. So when Ramy has to endure what he has endured, well, I think that's the big evidence of music being as powerful as anything else and being, of course, as vulnerable as anyone else.
So Ramy, you see yourself as a human rights defender on top of being an artist?
Yeah, it just came in place naturally. But I am an artist before anything, and just when the revolution in Egypt started, I just naturally became here. So yes, because I also believe that everybody alive should be a human rights defender in a way or another, and I'm just doing it using the tool that I can, which is music.
Now that we see the long-term effects of the Balaha video, several people were imprisoned and even people were just listening to it. Do you think in general it has had what we call a cooling effect on artists in Egypt and some of the other countries nearby to be less critical, to be more afraid, to do more self-censorship?
Okay, because it was already so bad also before Balaha song was released, so I can't stop at Balaha as a page and say like before and after. But for sure it had also an impact because the government reaction was like sending a message to the whole music scene, like yeah, if you think that way, so this would happen. And that's what leads to something so dangerous, one of the most dangerous enemies to artists, which is self-censorship. And that the government in Egypt now, they already oppressed everybody, they don't give any space for freedom of expression, but they pushed it to the extreme limits when they make the artists limiting themselves. And this is very sad and scary facts, but at the same time, if you are an artist living in Egypt, it's extremely understandable that how to survive as an artist, how to make a living, like what Alfons was saying, that even the most basic rights to just earn money from your profession, like you can't go that direction in Egypt, or then you will lose your job and then you might lose your life, like what happened.
In a minute, I'll go back to Andra. But if you have come into this session recently, you're watching the first edition of the Safe Havens Freedom Talks, broadcasted from the Museum of Movements in Malmö, which is actually a museum in the making in Sweden. It has its interests in democracy, in migration and human rights issues, and takes on the gaze of civil society movements in these matters. And the MOM program, as I would call it, you can see behind me MOM, that's the Museum of Movements. The Freedom Talks is closely connected to the annual Global Safe Havens Conference and a network of human rights defenders in the arts who have gathered here in Malmö since 2013. Last year, many also gathered in Cape Town. The programs are produced together with the Global Arts Rights Justice Sector Fighting for Artistic Freedom. And you can submit questions to us or comments on social media, and we'll pick them up a little bit later if you have anything to add or ask about. And I'll now go back to you, Andra, because we've talked about Shady and the UN Special Rapporteur, Agnes Kalamar. What about the two others, the two other cases? Where are we there?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Yes. Well, with Mustafa, let's start with the good news. With Mustafa, we discussed with Sanni and Ramy for a long time, and in the end, we decided to take an approach that was a bit different. So he was in pretrial detention, just like Shady. They were arrested at the same time. So again, unlawful pretrial detention. So what we thought would be good to do was to send a letter to President Sisi and to ask for a pardon with the occasion of the Eid celebration. Now, why I say the approach was different is because we decided to leave out any reference to human rights, freedom of expression, any international obligations that Egypt has, so that we only focused on we were making a plea for clemency. We were only referring to their own legislation, saying, Mr. President, your own legislation says that the time limit of 2 years had expired. Please release Mustafa on that basis, and in the spirit of magnanimity and goodwill. So we prepared this letter and we sent it by post and by email. We have also CC'd UN Human Rights Commissioner Michelle Bachelet, and again sent her the letter by email and by post as well. Now that was, I personally sent the email from my email address to the Egyptian president's office, and that was a bit strange as a feeling, but we don't know exactly if this was the reason for his release order. But days after we sent this letter, he received a release order with the mention that the reason for the release was the expiry of the 2-year time limit of pretrial detention, exactly what we had invoked. Now, while we would like to believe it has something to do with it, I don't think we'll ever know, but I think we all like to believe that.
I think that's one of the challenges also working on cases like that exactly as you say, you never know when an artist is released because of your letter or because you talked to a diplomat or whatever. Of course, the most important...
The local lawyer also does his work on his side. And we've been, like always, especially for Galal, we've been in touch with the local lawyer in Egypt constantly. So there are things going on in parallel, and you never know. but I also think there is this general assumption that the judiciary or the government is like a monolith, and they act with a coherence all the time, and they have a political agenda and go straight to the point. But as Sanni also said, that there is an element of randomness sometimes in these issues. You can be released or put behind bars for reasons as the political agenda, but also for corruption or incompetence or so many other reasons. And it is this element of randomness that makes our work very complicated. It's uncharted territory for everyone. There's no manual on how to do this. So I think we need to be creative. And,
you mentioned the UN procedures, the UN Special Rapporteurs, and of course there are all kind of conventions that could also deal with this. What about the EU? Because if you look at the EU Commission and the policy papers, obviously human rights, freedom of expression is part of the value system. So when the EU works with other countries, including Egypt, it should be on the agenda. Do you see EU forwarding their positions when it comes to human rights, or are we in a situation where it's still trade that is the most important issue, and then human rights only occasionally comes up in those countries where there are no big interests?
Definitely. I think EU can play a big role. They have their own human rights and diplomatic services in the entire world. And but this is not the avenue that I am using as a lawyer. I think this is organizations like maybe the Music Council or other human rights organizations that are using advocacy as a tool and campaigning as a tool could maybe make use of. I'm not saying I think it's working perfectly, but this is not what I have been doing when working on these cases. For me, it was very legal from the beginning, legal or quasi-legal in the case of the UN.
Sanni, maybe you can add something to this. Have you any experiences that you can get either diplomats from neighboring countries or the EU to intervene in a situation like this?
Well, we have been updating the Nordic ministries of foreign relations all the time, and they have been receiving this information, and we know that it is there, but of course we don't know what happens behind closed doors, as in UN as well. But this is what we are doing all the time and updating, and it's the most important for us is that the people who work on these things, that they know about these things.
Andra, would you like to add something on those cases that you're still working on?
We haven't spoken much about Galal. I don't know. I mean, we haven't spoken at all about Galal. I don't know if we still have time.
Yes, of course.
Well, with Galal, when I took on the case, he had 2 pending trials. That was 1.5 years ago. He had a trial before the military court where he had been convicted to 3 years imprisonment by a first instance court, and a parallel trial in a civil court where he was accused of terrorism and insulting the military. When I took on the case, Galal was on a hunger strike. He had started a hunger strike at the end of January, and then he was also awaiting surgery. So there was a life-threatening situation surrounding the case. So I didn't see any other way but to go to Geneva, to go to the UN. And there I was already in touch by email with the chair of the working group on arbitrary detention, but it felt important that I go and I meet with his office. So it's what I did, and I met with the office of the UN working group on arbitrary detention, which again is an independent body of experts that investigates arbitrary arrest and detention. So they have 2 avenues. They have the ordinary submission that you can make, but you can also submit an urgent appeal. And this is what we did. We submitted an urgent appeal, which means we don't want the UN to say Egypt is guilty of human rights violations. We want the UN and the working group to intervene through the diplomatic channels and to have an urgent action where they are securing Galal's mental and physical integrity because of how times, how sensitive it was, like the entire situation. So this is what I did. I submitted my urgent appeal. With the occasion, I've also met with Karim Abenem, who is the UN Special Rapporteur in the field of cultural rights, and she's been extremely gracious and very helpful. And herself, together with David Kay, UN Special Rapporteur in the field of free speech, they joined the working group on arbitrary detention to make a communication to the Egyptian government. Now, this communication is available on our website and on the UN website, but again, we don't know what came out of it. But days after my Geneva trip, the charges in the civil trial were dropped. And again, Mokhtar, who is the lawyer of Galal in Egypt, has done his own work there. So we don't know why, but we were extremely happy that, because this was a trial where he was risking the death penalty. He was accused of joining a terrorist group, as opposed to the military court trial where he was charged with blasphemy and insulting the military again, but charges that were not terrorism. So we were very happy. So where we are now is that Galal is in prison serving his 3-year sentence, and this is where we are.
Having worked on submissions to various special rapporteurs, I know from my personal experience that it's a lot of work. You've got to have all the details right, because if you have anything wrong, the government say, well, this is not the case. So I'm wondering, it sounds like you've spent weeks on this work, and you're doing this pro bono. Why are you doing this pro bono?
Well, just going back to the first part of the question, I had immense help from Ramy, who was the link between me and the people in prison, including in Shady's case, where we had information coming from prison, and with Galal as well. So I had to have the power of attorney signed by Galal's family, for instance, and that was Ramy that has always interfaced between me and the family. They don't speak English. The local lawyer doesn't speak English very well either. So there was a lot of work surrounding all this, but I've always had Ramy there to liaise between me and the people in Egypt. Now, why am I doing this? You're asking. Well, I think, as Ramy said, and Alfonso, it's a duty that we all have to protect and to use the instruments that we have to do what we can. And I feel I have a legal expertise that I felt was lacking in the field. I came into this field like 2 years ago. It was almost by accident. I attended the Safe Havens conference actually in Berlin, just the last day of the Safe Havens conference, and everyone was speaking about the rights of artists, and there were just 2 lawyers present, and there was a conference of hundreds of people, and in the breaks in between sessions, people were just flooding to me asking for help. I have people in Iran called before the revolutionary court. What can I do? I have that person. So I started connecting them. I have a large network of lawyers that I started, tapping into and using. So I realized that there is a need for this kind of help, and I have the resources, and I have the knowledge, and I feel an obligation to follow that.
So what you're saying is that there are actually a number of lawyers around the world who are willing to work on these cases pro bono. Would you also say that it's essential that you always work with a local lawyer who knows the local context?
Always. So, yes, if you look for them, you find the lawyers willing to work for free, and you find the legal experts, and you find the translators, because in our teams, we have 1-2 translators all the time to connect us with the local lawyers. So they are willing to work for free if you manage to persuade them, and I think I have that talent sometimes to persuade people to work for free. So yes, we have these huge teams, and they all work for free. And if you're looking for the nice people, you find them. They are there. But what's most interesting, I feel, is that, and important in this discussion, is that the lawyers I'm working with are the best lawyers in the countries. And I'm looking for the experts, and I have my own network, but my own network helps me to find lawyers in countries where otherwise I wouldn't have access to a network of lawyers that is specialized. That answers your question.
Thank you. Alfons, we are soon rounding up, and I'll end up in Helsinki in a few minutes. But in your view, what are the biggest challenges, and why is artistic freedom important?
Well, let me start by saying that artistic freedom is the future. It's only with artistic freedom that you actually create something not yet created, where you create something really not just as anything else already existing. And that is culture. It is about sometimes provoking, maybe not even wanting to do so. That's not the reason. The reason is to create, and this is how we develop our societies, really. And I would say that there are differences in challenges from different regions. And you can also see that in Sweden, sometimes you feel that, well, we don't have that kind of censorship, but we do. We have self-censorship, as Ramy said. We need to fit in where others decide. Sometimes it's not about going to prison, but it's about creating something that will put you in this small digital window that someone big decides over. So this reduces really the diversity. So I would say that there are three things necessary, regardless if it's Egypt or if it's working with YouTube from another country, and that is competition, it's transparency, and freedom of choice. And let me just explain very briefly what I mean. Competition is really not just having not one candidate for a party becoming a president, or not one platform that is the only one that you have no choice. Transparency is for all of us to see who they are. And the freedom of choice is for us to be able to choose whoever we want to work with, or whoever we want to have as our leader of a company or a country.
As you mentioned, there is freedom of speech. You have a lot of legal rights in most countries in Europe and in Sweden. But we also see a tendency of some kind of new sensitivity among civil groups, not civil rights groups, but civil groups who feel that they're getting offended by this or that, or by identity politics, and that has also been the case in Sweden. Do you think there's an increasing self-censorship in cultural institutions and amongst artists, or what they would address?
Yes, I believe so. And I think that is up to us to make sure that we change that development. We are afraid of creating something that will reduce our own chances to succeed, or maybe just scared of making anyone else uneasy. And I think this is something we do see quite often. But you and I, we worked with the UN on the report on artistic freedom. And I think that was very important when we saw that most of the cases, when you as an artist or a creator, when you offend someone, usually it's not really the other one being offended that brings this to the public. It's a third party saying, look, they are offended by this, and it's used by a third party with power. So I'm not so sure that we actually offend that many people with our culture, but someone wants us to at least make appearance that is the case.
Thank you very much, Alfons. Sanni, we're calling this the Safe Havens Freedom Talks. safe havens can look very differently. You have a tradition in Finland for offering spaces to artists in general, but also artists at risk. Can you tell a little bit about that?
Thank you. Yes, the Safe Havens are international network organized by organizations and different parties around the world. And in Finland, these residencies are organized by an organization called Artists at Risk. And this Helsinki model is quite unique because it is a network of arts and human rights organizations. So it means that practically when a musician comes to this safe haven artist residency, when they are persecuted and they come here, we are involved to provide them with access to local scene and equipment and colleagues and legal advice and so on. And I think it's really important to have all the local artists and organizations involved to also give the artists not only safety but the chance to make their art and keep their voice that somebody was trying to silence somewhere else. So that's what we are working on. And the artists are suddenly in a new environment and without their tools and colleagues and audience. So that's what I see the most important, what we can do.
And Ramy, when you succeeded getting out of Egypt and you knew that you were already going to be threatened or even imprisoned, you came to Sweden and to Finland, and you had residence in Malmö here for 2 years. What did it mean to you as an artist to have a safe haven?
It's a great chance to get as an artist. If I would talk about my case, it was another chance for me to be able to continue what I started back in Egypt. And thanks to you and thanks to Frederick, that I got the chance to be in Malmö and have my residency. I wouldn't say that it was very easy experience to be suddenly stripped from all your tools and a new environment. There's no friends, no family, but definitely it was extremely helpful, and especially in the practical and career-wise. I could maintain and sustain what I started. That's what I can be thankful for.
Do you think that you are a different kind of artist now than you were when you were still in Egypt?
The skills, I can talk that I could tour the world. I could see like crazy studios in Sweden and Finland and work with like very professional musicians and get to understand the copyrights of the artist, things that we're not familiar with in Egypt, to know my rights as an artist and to have the chance to develop myself. Yes, because in Egypt I was more like the street artist, that songwriter that have my guitar and just living the moment with all my heart and my feelings. But here I got the chance to develop myself as an artist, and that started from the artist residency that I had.
In a few moments, we'll round up the session with the new video, and after the video, Frederick L. will also join me and tell a little bit about the sessions here. So, the video, Ramy, that we are going to show. Could you tell a little bit about that video?
I just want to say one thing before that, that it's me and you and Alfons Karabuda, we met 9 years and a half ago in Stockholm when it was my first time to come to Sweden. And just through this whole conversation now, I was just thinking, like, when we met almost 10 years ago, I wouldn't think that we will be having this talk here now like this. And I'm so thankful for having you both and how you've been always supportive, and also Frederick Ilg and all his support. So Thank you, guys. Thanks.
And before I say thanks again to Sanni and Alfons and Andra, and of course you, Ramy, then please introduce us to the video.
Okay. The video is basically Shady's letter asking for help from jail. But before I talk about the video again, sorry, just I wanna say something. I want the people to remember Shady, the artist, the super young, talented artist that was full of kindness and was super peaceful human being. And remember him for all his art, not just this song. He was a great artist. And this letter is Shady Habash's last letter, and he was basically sending it from jail, asking for help from his friends, from everybody. And so sad to talk about this track that it was meant to be as a track in his release campaign to release him from jail. But now that's not the case. He's not between us anymore, and it became a memorial. So listen to Shady's words.
السجن ما بيموتش، بس الوحدة بتموت. السجن ما بيموتش، بس الوحدة بتموت. أنا محتاج دعمكم عشان ما موتش. في السنتين اللي فاتوا أنا حاولت أقاوم كل اللي بيحصل لي لوحدي عشان أخرج لكم نفس الشخص اللي تعرفوه، بس ما بقيتش قادر خلاص. ما بقيتش قادر. مفهوم المقاومة في السجن إنك بتقاوم نفسك وبتحافظ عليها هي وإنسانيتك من الآثار السلبية من اللي بتشوفه بتعيشه كل يوم، وأبسطها إنك تتجنن أو تموت بالبطيء لكونك مرمي في أوضة بقالك سنتين ومنسي مش عارف هتخرج منها إمتى أو إزاي. والنتيجة اني لسه في السجن، وكل 45 يوم بنزل عند قاضي وتكون نفس النتيجة. تجديد 45 يوم، تجديد 45 يوم، تجديد 45 يوم من غير حتى ما يبصلي او يبص لورا القضية اللي كل اللي فيها مشيوا من شهور. محتاج لدعمكم ومحتاجكم تفكروهم اني لسه محبوس، وانهم ناسيني، واني بموت بالبطيء كل يوم لمجرد اني عارف اني لوحدي قدام كل ده، واني عارف ان ليا اصحاب كتير بيحبوني وخايفين يكتبوا عني او فاكرين اني هخرج من غير دعمهم ليا. انا محتاج لكم ومحتاج لدعمكم اكتر من اي وقت. السجن ما بيموتش، بس الوحدة بتموت. شادي حبش.
PDF. Well, welcome back after the video, Frederick L., organizer of this whole event.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for joining this extremely important conversation. Thank you so much, Ole, Sanni, Alfons, Ramy, Andra, and everyone at home listening and watching this very important conversation on the Balaha case. We're happy that we could support the cause in our way with the facilities that we have. And of course, artistic freedom and freedom of speech are core values, core issues that the Museum of Movements will work with and is working with through the global network, the Safe Havens network that we have built over the years together, all together, because these are very complex issues, and we really need to have the right people talking in the right forums, like we've had today. And I hope we have brought things a little bit further and brought the knowledge out between us, everyone who's been part of this, listening and joining. The Museum of Movements will continue to have conversations and also artistic interventions in this series that we call the Freedom Talks at MOM. So please join us again for this, and also check our website and our social media for other concepts that we're also broadcasting, until we can start opening the space again and also let people in and to join us in the physical space in real life. So keep your eyes open on our websites. Thank you everyone again, and stay safe everyone, and welcome back next time.
Bye-bye.